So I've had something that's been really bothering me lately a lot. And I think that there's a big problem with this particular issue. And that is that news articles and sound bites and news bites and YouTube videos on both sides of any conversation aren't putting in sources for their information. If I hear the word report or study or expert testimony or anything of this type of nature, I expect at the end of the article or hyperlinked inside the article is also fine, but there should be a source where I can go and see where this information is coming from. Because anybody can say anything. In fact, I listen to podcasts where it's complete opinion that is being done. There's one called Pod Saves America. I personally think that podcast is atrocious because they never source anything. They are completely opinionated and have zero backing to any of their opinions other than them saying that there's recent studies or there's recent reports or whatever, but they never actually provide any of this information. And for me, that is a big issue. If I'm reading something, a news article, whether it is about the foreign affairs or something happening in our government or something that's happening with a company, or I don't care what it is, vaccines, anything. And people are citing reliable reports or reliable studies or recent, whatever it is, the source should be listed with the news article. And if news articles aren't listing their sources, as far as if they're quoting something or they're referencing it as some sort of evidence to back their point or as a mode of evidence to support their case or whatever, it needs to have a source. If you don't provide a source or the news article doesn't provide a source, then how can I possibly check to ensure that the information you have interpreted and are presenting to me has been interpreted in a way that I think is accurate? And that's the problem, is we're relying on sound bites and cherry picking of information without being able to go back and find this information ourselves or having to spend a ton of time. I just recently saw a video from a doctor whose name is Ryan Cole. He was talking about vitamin D and the effects of that on our immune system. He talked a little bit about masking and vaccines, etc. And I thought he made some really good points. The problem is that he linked zero sources to where he got his information. He's just presenting everything as if it's fact, and I can't even establish whether that's true or not. I just have to take him at his word. And okay, great. He's a Mayo Clinic trained physician who's opened his own laboratories that have been in business for lots of years. He's probably a reputable doctor. Seems like he's very astute and has read up on and very familiar with all of the information. However, he doesn't put out any sources for where his information, he just states it as if it's fact and I should believe it. And that is a problem. I don't care whether I agree with you or not. I want to see the source. And I'm imploring for you as a critical thinking reader and absorber of information, that's not right. But if you are a person who's taking in news and articles and having an opinion about it, I'm encouraging you to check those articles and make sure they have sources, because if they don't, you should question the article completely and totally. And if they do have sources, you should go to that source yourself, read that information that they picked out a quote from or they're referencing, and see if it jibes with the way that they're actually presenting it, because a lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times when there are sources, I go and I read the source and I'm like, that's not what this article said, or that's not what they actually said about this. That was about this other point. And it happens all the time, because I just did a podcast about 2 weeks ago or so, a little more, where I made a passing reference to the fact that an article had been reprinted by another source, news source, and it hadn't credited the first one. But that was like a passing observation that really had nothing to do with the content of my podcast. And somebody argued that point with me because they didn't like the rest of the information I had in my podcast about the particular topic. And I was thinking, it's such a red herring. It's ridiculous and it's unnecessary. Like, okay, so apparently these two news media outlets are related or one owns the other, and so they don't have to credit the reprint. Who cares? It's such a minor, non-important point. It was just an observation. But meanwhile, I have linked a bazillion sources to this podcast, stating where I got my information, sharing where I was clipping from or what articles I was quoting. That is how a proper news outlet or a YouTube video or podcast or anything should be documenting where their information is coming from. It shouldn't be something I have to hunt down. If you're presenting the information, you should present the sources too. And that's what I got to say today. Y'all take it easy now.